We will call the regular school board meeting for Monday, June 13, 2022 for the Stevens Point Area Public School District School Board. I will have Carlin read the roll and verify the quorum.
Mr. Ebel.
Here.
Ms. Bushman.
Here.
Mr. Pope is
Excused.
excused. May try to join virtually. Ms. Portson.
Here.
Mr. Wade.
Here.
Ms. Scott.
Here.
Mr. Robbie.
Here.
Ms. Rano. Ms. Erler.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
All right, thank you. We will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will move into item 4, public comments. We did not receive any public comments by email. We have one individual here who has signed up, Keith Kudrowski, and he is speaking on agenda item 6C. Is Keith present? You can come on up to the podium. If you could state your name and address, please.
Keith Kudrowski, 1536 Water Street, Stevens Point. No complaints about the people on there. I'm a little concerned that I don't see anything about a security officer, considering what's happened lately and the fast response you all took when you're worried people like me were to come and complain about things. You were able to get that door locked. But you're having trouble taking up the issue of security for the kids in the school. I find that very disenfranchising, very dishonest by you all that you're not addressing this security problem by hiring an officer. I understand, I could be wrong, that the security officer role was subdued somewhat to bring on some more diversity people who aren't going to protect their children. It's important that we accept people. I accept people. I've lived in DC. I work with people all over the world. Security for the kids, you were able to do it to that door back a few months ago. I don't know. You don't have anyone on the hire thing. I don't see anything on your agenda to address this. So I think it's very important. Do it right. Thank you.
Thank you. I would note that actually on our agenda this evening, if you take a look at the full agenda and for the public to take a look at the full agenda, we do have a section that we will be discussing district safety and security.
Okay, I apologize.
Yeah, we're having it's going to be a total briefing
13C.
For district safety and security on the agenda this evening. And we are going to have,
quick. I apologize.
no, we're going to have a presentation about that, so you might want to stick around, and then I think you'll have a better understanding of where we are at, okay?
I had a ball game to watch, but I'm going to stick as long as I can.
No, that's fine, and
45 minutes on.
And you're welcome. We live stream, but then we also record it. And so if you aren't able to stick around this evening, you can watch it
Absolutely.
from our website, okay?
All right, appreciate it.
You bet, you bet. Thank you. Okay, we will move into item 5, presentations. Sarah O'Donnell.
Hello. The Make Communication Dashboard is available in your packet. Looking first at our earned media for the previous month, we saw consistent coverage compared to, I guess that would have been April. Stories garnering the highest media attention included coaching announcements for SPASH football and swimming, as well as incoming principal announcements, student demonstration at SPASH on the 12th, and articles focusing on school safety following the tragedy in Texas, as well as graduation. WAW Channel 9 provided us with the most coverage and reach to an audience of about 2.3 million over the course of the month. May is a very heavy content month because it's a very exciting month for schools. So social channels across platforms performed well, specifically with engagements, which is what we're really focusing on. We're up over 160% on all analyzed social channels, over 175% on the district channel, so excited to see that. I also included some specific metrics on the senior spotlight content that we tried this year. Super fun, kids submitted their own stuff, got to put it out there. Only had a couple I had to ask for different photos that were a little more appropriate, so it was fun, and we'll do it again. It was a good spot. As I begin to put together the annual report for communications, this is a dashboard that I do every month for you. I change it a little bit every year, so I'll be looking forward to next year to kind of see what I would like to report, but I'm also interested in what you would like to see on there. So if there's changes that you would like, let me know, and we'll make those for you. With that, questions?
Any questions of Sarah?
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, we'll move into item B, Superintendent's report. Craig Gerlach.
Just a couple things. Summer school started today. We have just over 2,400 students enrolled, so that's exciting. We did have a few bus issues that we'll iron out some kinks. And unfortunately, our pool at PJ is down. We're hoping that it was going to be up and going, so hopefully tomorrow, because it's going to be quite warm tomorrow. And we have some exciting news from PODS. We got an email from Connie today. The district was awarded a charter school expansion grant in the amount of $641,000. So I believe if Connie is here, I think this is our third grant. Is that right, Connie?
Actually, our fourth.
Fourth, with including the planning.
Planning grant, 2 implementation.
Yeah. So that's always exciting news. We also have with us tonight the new Director of Secondary Education, Jeff Milzner. If you want to stand up, and Connie, if you want to introduce him and say a few things about him.
Come on up, Jeff, to the podium. So we're happy to introduce Jeff Milzner. He's going to be replacing Connie. Jeff actually was a science teacher here in the district, as well as a technology integration specialist, and then left us, I think, in 2015 and went to Colorado, where he served as a PD coordinator, digital content manager, and now is the Assistant Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment.
That's correct.
All right, so welcome, Jeff. Feel free to say a few words.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be back home. I came from Wisconsin. Every time I was there, every time I did a presentation, anytime I used boat or a boat, they definitely picked it up, usually Canada. I've gotten an opportunity to get into all of the secondary schools. Today I was meeting with John Vollendorf. I've been able to get in and talk to Jen, and then my old principal, Dan Dobratz. And Connie has been wonderful, as well as Corey, welcoming me and bringing me back. We're excited. My son will be a PJ boy, so he'll have all of the friends that I worked with will have him, and then my daughter will be at Bannock. So we're happy to be back in the community.
Great.
Great.
Thanks,
Welcome.
Jeff. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Big shoes to fill.
Anything else?
That's it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Do board members have any questions of Craig? Item C is recognition of Superintendent Gerlach's retirement. Craig has been with us since July of 2016. Many of us remember at the time when Craig arrived here. We, as a school board, were having some relatively serious struggles, had been for a while. We had a failed superintendent search. We had a 1 year, Lee Bush stepped in for 1 year to be an interim superintendent for us. And Craig and Jan, his wife, made the decision to explore opportunities back here in central Wisconsin. As he is a Wisconsin Rapids alum, we have never held that against him. But we've appreciated his understanding of the area. I think each of us, I'd like you all to feel free to make any comments you'd like. I just wanted to list some of the highlights that I feel that Craig has helped shepherd through for our district during the time he was with us. And he would be the first person to say that he's not the one that has done it, that it has taken a team, and that he has been very fortunate to have wonderful people to work with. But as we all know, every team needs a good coach, providing that leadership and that direction, and Craig has definitely been that. When he first started with us, he went right to work settling the 6 labor contracts that we had not yet signed. We were the only district at the time since in post-Act 10 in 2016 that had not signed a labor, agreed on a labor contract post-Act 10. And so his first order of business, the board asked him to do that. He did so. Next order of business was a supplemental salary plan, not only for our teachers, but all of our staff members. That was another accomplishment. At the same time, we embarked with the board's approval on a facilities survey, having all of our buildings surveyed to determine what their needs were moving into the next 20 to 30 years. And as a result of that survey, we put together 2 referendum, a facilities referendum and an operational referendum. Facilities in the tune of $75.9 million. Our operating referendum was a recurring referendum of $3.5 million. Craig attended 75-plus meetings, internal and external, and I know that because I was there with him at most of them, to really be able to lay out the facts to our community about the needs that we had and the importance of voting. However they chose, becoming educated and voting, and we are very grateful that our community passed the facilities referendum by 68%, and our recurring operating referendum by 66%, which was just an overwhelming show of support from the community. Craig also, prior to that referendum happening, as we all, I think board members who were on the board at the time, learned that the governor was going to be closing the energy exemption portion of our state law. We were made aware of that at the beginning of November. Because of that facilities review, because of Craig's leadership and his staff support, we were able to pass a $25.5 million capital expenditure under that energy exemptions law prior to it expiring, to bring our district buildings up to speed and provide energy efficiency. He has clearly shepherded us through COVID, was on the ground making day-to-day decisions, and during that time, we all know, not only did our administration and our staff work tirelessly to educate our kids, but they also worked to support them, to provide mental health support for them, and even to work very closely with Boys and Girls Club in the Y to provide childcare needs during those times that we were shut down as a district. So again, that isn't by any means exhaustive of Craig's job, because all of those, frankly, are projects that the board approved for the superintendent to take on, in addition to his overall regular job of running our schools day to day. I'm going to miss him. We are going to miss his sound leadership. I'm grateful that one other major thing he did was focus over the last several years on succession planning in the district, which has resulted in a number of internal promotions of staff, because there's been a real focus on identifying staff talents and interest in moving up in the organization. And Corey Hirschbrenner, who's going to be our new superintendent as of July 1, is an incredible example of that. And we are very grateful for that. And the willingness to let us know you were retiring. back in September, so we had a whole year, school year to work with Corey and Craig together as he was transitioning out of the superintendent position. So thank you for your leadership and for your dedication to our district, and you will be missed.
Thank you. I really don't like recognition at all. And I asked Meg, please, don't put this on the agenda. That said, I did some quick calculations. I've been a superintendent in 5 districts. I've worked with well over 50 board members. I've attended approximately 575 board meetings and committee meetings. It's time to get a life. No offense. That's crazy. And I've worked for 7 school board presidents. And I can say this, out of all the positions I've had in my career, this clearly has been the most enjoyable. The people that I work with, we've had a very solid board since I've been here. There's been turnover, yet the direction, we continue to move forward. We've dealt with a number of significant issues. Generally speaking, we don't necessarily all agree, but we're agreeable. And when we leave and make decisions, we tend to get along. I've got the best administrative team that I've worked with in my career, and this is a wonderful community. So it's a good fit. And of course, for this job to work, it needs to be the right fit between the school board and the superintendent. And Meg and I have had our moments. Generally speaking, we have worked very well together. So appreciate the opportunity, and I'm very grateful for it. Thank you. Time to move on.
I just want to say that I think we're very fortunate to have you come to our district with your years of experience and your variety of experiences. And I think your calm demeanor has really been an asset to our school district in terms of handling some of the possible drama that may have taken place in the last 4 or 5 years while you're here. But I also think that you're a good human being, and that makes a big difference when you have someone in your position who, kind of sees the big picture, and you value other people. And I think that has served the district well, and certainly you as well. So thanks for all you've done for our district. Appreciate it.
Jeff?
It's been a pleasure working with you, Craig, and I really appreciate your dedication to the community and to our district. Your legacy is the staff that you left behind. You created an awesome staff. You mentored them and brought them up into the organization, and we're a better district now than we were when you came, and we appreciate all the work that you did.
And I'd just like to add, I appreciate your humor. It's been an interesting experience for me serving on a school board for the last 5 years, and I appreciate your humor. You're extremely personable, and I always felt I could call you if I needed information, if I needed a little help understanding an issue. I felt like I could pick up the phone and call you, and you'd help me. And as a school board member, that's greatly appreciated. So thank you.
Anything? Right. So I will just add, I agree with everything that the board members have said. I've worked along with 6 superintendents, and I just have to say, when major decisions have had to be made, and there were many over the years with Craig, asking questions, getting explanations, understanding the work that he and his staff have done, as a community member, elected by people, I always felt comfortable. I always felt like I'm getting the answers that community people would want to know, and I'm comfortable with that. And when you have a superintendent, that you don't feel like you can ask questions, but you don't need to be questioning for our community, I think that is a quality that is so important, and we had that. And we will miss you. We will dearly miss you. And I do like that sense of humor, too.
All right.
I think everyone will miss you, Craig. And again, we've had our moments. I appreciate the fact that I knew I could call you on a moment's notice, like when there was a false alarm at Ben Franklin. You talked me off of a ledge, I think, because I had 2 grandchildren in that building, and it was pretty traumatic. And you were able, to handle that with a great deal of ease, apparently.
I was also going 90 miles an hour because I was at the Auditorium downtown Madison, the state swimming finals. And I get a phone call, and I thought, oh my goodness. And I may have broke a speed record that day.
Attaboy.
I wasn't going to get pulled over because all the law enforcement were here. From Madison all the way here. Not a laughing matter, but wow.
We can laugh afterwards.
Thank
yeah.
you. Appreciate it.
Craig, it was a nice 2 months working with you. I wish you the best in your well-deserved retirement.
Yeah, thank you, Jen.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes the minutes of the prior school board meeting of May 9th, 2022, the approval of the schedule of monthly bills, and the employment recommendations. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Second. Motion by Mike, second by Barb. Any discussion or questions on the motion? Hearing none, I will have Carlin call the roll due to the bills.
Mr. Wade,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Ebel,
Yes.
Ms. Portson,
Yes.
Ms. Bushman,
Yes.
Mr. Robbie,
Yep.
Ms. Erler.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We will move into the business services and HR portion of the agenda, and I'll turn that over to Mike Wade, the committee chair.
Yeah, well, we had a very good business services, human resources committee meeting. The first item on our agenda is 7B, which is health and dental insurance for bus drivers. And Dr. Owens, you want to tell us the details on that?
On the bus service?
Yes, health and dental insurance for bus drivers.
Okay. Beth and I are, Beth McConowitz, the Director of Human Resources, and I are recommending that we make health and dental insurance available for the bus drivers of the school district. This benefit, we feel, brings equity to the group, principally because all of the other groups in our district have that opportunity to avail themselves of that particular benefit. And this one group has, to date, been left out of that mix. We employ about 55 bus drivers approximately, and half of those, by their nature of the number of hours that they work, wouldn't be eligible for the benefit anyway, because they have to work at least 30 hours to qualify. And of the group that remains, only about half of those probably would even qualify as well. So we're getting down to around maybe, we're talking about 10 to 15 people probably at the most that would be, if that many. So the benefit is expected to cost, if the 10 or 15 were to sign up, approximately $250,000. And it's our recommendation for the benefit of equity, although it may also help somewhat in terms of certainly retention, but perhaps in recruiting, we'd recommend that to you.
So I will move to approve extending health and dental insurance to bus drivers.
Second.
So I have a motion by Mike and a second by Jeff. Discussion and questions, including questions for Dr. Owens or Beth. Go ahead, Dennis.
Dr. Owens, at the committee meeting, I asked about the possibility of finding savings within the transportation budget to make that as close to budget neutral as possible, similar to what we did when we added positions in the elementary programming for interventionists. Were you able to look over that at all?
Yes, if you could use your microphone, it'll make it much easier for me to to hear you. But I did catch that. Yes, I'm able to take that $250,000, reduce the budget by that amount.
The transportation budget?
Yes.
Thank you for looking into it. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Are there any other questions of board members on the motion?
I just want to say, Dr. Owens, on how much I appreciate that he does look at this benefit for the bus drivers. And I do believe that our benefit packages are a method of retaining staff and also of recruiting staff, and as well as the equity issue. So I really do appreciate that you brought this forward to the board.
And I do also want to note that you did note at the business services meeting that bus drivers in our surrounding districts, many of them, they don't have their own, we run our own buses, but they contract out, and they are covered by health, and they have health and, dental insurance. So again, we're likely not recruiting a lot of bus drivers from other communities just because of the nature of the, the work and the timing. But we all know that we have struggled forever with bus drivers, in particular the last couple of years through COVID and now. So equity, I agree, is appropriate as the most important reason, but also the potential ability to be able to recruit bus drivers and/or maybe have some of our existing bus drivers choose to work 2 shifts versus 1 would be a great help to us. All right, all those in favor in the motion with aye?
Aye.
Any opposed with nay? Motion carries.
Okay, our next item is 7C, our 10-year capital improvement plan. This is a plan that we approve every year. A year goes off and a new year comes on, and so, Dr. Owens, you want to talk about the plan at all?
I'd like to add just a couple of things that maybe would help in the understanding of the plan a little bit too. In your background, you find the detail of all of the items that comprise the 10-year plan. There's a number of capital repair and remodeling that is listed on here. And all of the items that are on this list then appear in this summary, which breaks it out by year. The first year of that plan is what we're going to be doing in actual projects coming up. Throughout the rest of the years, these projects that are on this detail list are scattered in terms of estimating when we might do them, et cetera. But we bring them forward as funds allow and as we want to attack these. I should also point out there are no referendum items on this list. This is all just our own additional capital repairs and remodelings and things that we've identified. I also want to point out that this list at this time is all general fund activities, and any one item on here or items can be by the board designated later on as a 46 fund project. So this is for identifying principally general fund projects and potentially 46 fund projects. So if in the future we want to take some type of remodeling or roof repair or something that we need to move up and do quickly, and it's beyond our current general fund operations, and we want to dip into the 46 fund to do that, we can. But before we do that, we would, one, need to identify what it is that we need to do. We need to bring roof section X, have that done, yada, yada. We would bring that to you at a future board meeting, explain the problem, explain what we need to do, and recommend that we would alter this 10-year plan to include this new item, and that item would be paid for out of the 46 fund. And if you agree to support that at that time, then you would move to do that, and then we would have authorization to begin that project using the 46 fund. And until that occurs, we would not touch the 46 fund. So just wanted to kind of clarify that so you knew. And so subject to any questions that you have, we would recommend
Yeah, I
Go ahead, Jeff.
have one clarification question. Could you just give us a brief explanation of what the 46 fund is?
Yes. I kind of did that a little bit.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. The 46 fund is for capital improvements and remodeling.
I must have faded out.
Say again?
I must have faded out.
Oh.
Thanks.
Yeah, you will.
That's the fund we set up, what, 5 years ago, 6 years ago?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Okay.
6 or 7 years ago. And the unique thing about that fund is, we couldn't spend anything from it for 5 years, and now we can. And anytime we put money into that fund, if it's out of the general fund, we are paid state aid on that money at the time we put it into the fund. But when it's expended, we don't get aid.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That we do get additional funds by
Yes.
putting the money into the
State aid.
46 fund. Thank
Yes.
you.
And that's helpful if we're in an environment in which our revenue limit is increasing. If we have no increase in our revenue limit, like this year, then it would only serve to reduce the property tax. It would not provide us any additional funds. Any increase in the revenue limit, any increase in state aid, as was the case this year, does not actually provide us, the school district, with any additional funds to operate the district. It merely reduces the property tax. So it's no new money at all.
Thank you.
And to clarify, Dr. Owens, there was over 5 million in the Fund 46, approximately,
The
$5
what?
million?
5 million?
Yeah, balance in Fund 46?
Yes, about 5.1.
Okay.
In fact, you can, every month when you get your schedule of bills, and also at the committee when you get the finance report, in the finance report, it's in there, all the fund balances show by fund, right in that report.
So,
I had a question, when I was reading through this, well, and thanks for clarifying that everything covered by referendum, I mean, that, these are in addition to that, basically.
Yeah.
But
these are-
in looking through them, the vast majority are those recurring expenses that we know we're gonna have to do over time, roof, repair, replacing univents, painting, window shade, those type of things. The one that that kind of struck me is just not, like, some things aren't like the other, is, we have $1.5 million project and a $3.3 million project, Ben Franklin. And, I mean, they're way out. One is they're both 2032. But they're actually adding, like, gyms and remodeling and creating a new production kitchen, service and dining area. And I guess for me, I'm wondering, how that project got identified as a priority project. I know we've done work on all of our buildings, but, I guess this is the first time since I've been on the board that we're, other than the referendum, that we're identifying a project 10 years out, without the board, talking about that. So I guess I'm just wondering, why that's on there, or whether a more appropriate route might be to not have that part of this, that routine, regular, but to, I don't know, is there another process that would come through the superintendent to the board for us to look at? Because I think, for me, that's more a board matter when we're talking about doing major, work in our buildings.
Items that are out in the 10-year range, like 32, like the one you described, are items that are listed so we don't lose sight of them. It doesn't necessarily mean we're even ever going to bring them forward.
Okay.
It means we need a place to store these projects or these ideas so they're not lost until we get to some point and say, absolutely, we're never ever going to do that. Then we'd remove it from the list. So there will be items that from time to time will be added to this list out at the end as a holding place, and they'll stay there, and then perhaps they'll just disappear. So the kitchen that you listed there is maybe something that we talked about at one time. We said, let's put it on the list so we don't forget about it, and then probably beyond that point, we haven't given it too much more thought, but we haven't dropped it from the list because we haven't gotten to that point yet where we're going to say that's never going to happen. but it's not been brought forward with any seriousness or to consideration yet. So that's why it can be a little confusing with this, but that's why I wanted to point out that the things that are out in that 7, 8, 9, 10 year, the kind of just the holding pattern. The things that are the more important, the more immediate, are the ones that get moved up into year 1, 2, and 3, where we're starting to get a little bit more, certainly number 1, because that's going to be happening, but 2 and 3, you can have things in 2 and 3 spin their wheels and sit there for 2, 3 years as well. So,
All right, thank you.
Dr. Owens, first off, thank you for putting this together. I think I appreciate the fact that we're able to look out and see some possibilities as far as some of our costs moving forward. I take it that these lists will be also budget dependent. For example, in the next 1, 2, maybe 3 years, we know we may have some budgetary issues. Some of these may be able to be delayed, some will have to be, higher priority, but some of these, as far as implementation, I take it will also depend upon where we are fiscally. Is that correct?
some of them what?
Some of these 1, 2, and 3 year projects will also depend upon where we are fiscally as far as whether we're able to move ahead with them?
Yeah, it's all dependent on a number of things. I think you described some of them, the availability of funds, the particular need for activity.
And for the board's purpose, when we start discussing which of these will move forward, do you have a general idea as to the priorities of each of them? For example, how many of these could be delayed and how many must be done now? Do you have a general sense of that, or haven't you had those conversations yet?
Well, this particular information, the background that I gave you is by building, so it's not sorted by year, so it makes it a little more difficult to pick out for you, but let me see.
I understand by year and that we could.
Ben Franklin, we've got some roof issues coming up that are listed in '24. So what we would do is Chris and I, and the director, our safety and facilities coordinator, we would meet with our roofing consultant, and we'd also inspect the roofs to determine their condition, et cetera, to see, can we let this go another year or two?
That's what I was wondering. Thank you.
So we'll actually inspect each item and maybe use a consultant from the outside if necessary and go forward. There's items on here, replacing tiles in the bathrooms in various buildings at McKinley or at PJ. So we would go, our facilities people would go, they'd meet with the principal, they'd look at the rooms and see the state of the porcelain. Are they all chipping, falling off, cracking, or are they in good shape? If they're in good shape, fine. If they're cracking and falling off, do we need to do something this year coming up or one more year after? And that's kind of how the process goes to move it up. It's not something that we typically sit around in a board committee and discuss. We would work that issue administratively. And if we get to a situation where let's say that the dollar items of the projects exceeded the availability of the budgeted monies that we're talking about, then we'd start to scratch our head and say, all right, we've got some choices. One, do we delay some of these projects regardless? Or if the answer to that is no, it's still too important, then we'd probably go to 2, should some of these be done out of the 46 fund? And then we'd bring that forward. That's when we'd come to the board and we'd start to say, here's our situation. We have these projects. They don't all fit in the box. But here's a solution, what would you like to do? That's when we would come to the board.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this is like a first pass, right? And then we continuously evaluate.
We're always evaluating this, yeah. And we will follow this plan unless something comes up where we feel we need to deviate, and then we have to bring it to you if we're going to deviate from it, because you have to approve that, especially if it's a 46 fund activity. Then we would. So each year, we go through that process of evaluating our facilities and the stuff that we've identified and haven't forgotten. We add stuff on it sometimes, too, when we do that recycle. And then we just repeat this process.
Barb, how do we add something to this list?
Oh, something would be added to the list if something got damaged or something broke or we sprung a leak somewhere and we needed to address it faster. if it's a real emergency, we have to do something real fast, we just take care of it right out of the budget. But if it's something that comes up where Chris identifies it, brings it to my attention and say, this is, we were gonna, well, an example would be a roof section. We were gonna do roof section D at the junior high 2 years from now, but we inspected it and our consultant says we're starting to get a lot of water under the fiber, under the roof sections, and we need to address that before we start to have a lot of insulation get wet and it runs down into classrooms. So that's kind of how things get moved into it.
Can I recommend a renovation of the Ben Franklin Auditorium? Theater?
I think you just did. You passed that thought on.
So noted.
So I will move to approve the revised 10-year capital improvement plan as presented.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Mike and a second by Dennis. Any discussion or questions on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Any opposed with nay? Motion carries.
Okay, the next item under business services is item D, preliminary 2022-23 budget. So every year at this time, we approve a preliminary budget for the upcoming academic year, and we spend a lot of time looking at the worksheets to develop the budget.
Okay.
And wanna take us through that?
Carlin has graciously accepted the challenge to put this up on the screen, and she's got it up there already. Yay! Great job. This is a preliminary budget, and obviously the numbers are going to change significantly between now and October when we do the final budget. On the next slide that you see, the middle sentence between those two paragraphs is probably the most important. Why do we even mess around with the preliminary budget? I mean, if we don't adopt a final one in October because we don't have our most critical bits of information, why are we even doing something now? Well, the reason for that is simply that the statute requires us to adopt one, so that stated in the first paragraph, but in that middle sentence, it's for the purpose of being able to expend funds. We have bills that come in constantly between July 1st and the end of October when the final budget is adopted, and we have to pay those bills, and we have to have some authority upon which to base our ability to pay those bills, and thus the preliminary budget. It gives you a framework of understanding kind of how we're progressing towards the final budget, but again, there are so many numbers that are going to change that the data here is just suggestive. I think let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. I like to start here, and I'll end on the slide, this identical slide at the end. But this shows the various funds that comprise our school district's budget. You have your general fund, which almost everything is in. Most things are in. That's our main operating budget that covers everything. We have special projects, which for the most part is made up of special education, but there are other activities of trust that deal with school-based accounting and just donations to the district. And the 30 fund is your debt service, which is paying the principal and interest for monies that we borrow for construction. The 40 fund is the construction fund. 50 fund is our food service operational enterprise fund. And then the 70 fund is just about completely deleted. There won't be any activity after this year. Then the community service fund is active in covering some areas of projects and things that take place that are for the benefit of the community as a whole and not just the school district itself. So the middle column shows the total expenditures, which comes out at the preliminarily at this point of just under 130 million. And the next two columns, the revenue and the tax levy, are the revenue for the district of all funds, and when you add it together, it's just a little under 118 million. There are a number of funds whose normal activity is to decrease. We would bring in less revenue than we spend, and that's normal. For example, the construction fund, that will continually go down, and you'll have deficits there, that's expected. And also in the debt service, that'll start to decline because we pay off debt, et cetera, as that goes down. So those things are not unusual to see at all. Then you have a section of the levy here. You've got last year's levy and this year's levy. It's showing a 2% decrease, 787,000, but again, this does not include any state aid. We don't know if there's any adjustments that the legislature is going to do between now and October with respect to per pupil or any other activities that they may choose to do. We don't know our pupil count, so that affects the revenue limit, et cetera. So there's just a number of unknowns there. Also, you see in the text followed by the numbers of the this year's and last year's equalized levy valuation. We're just a little over 5.2 billion with a B, $billion. And I'm using the exact same number because I mean, we don't know what the growth's going to be. It could be around 2.5%, but that's a guess. It could be more, it could be less. So as long as we have no idea what that number is yet, because it hasn't been certified, well, we might as well go with zero. So that's obviously also going to affect things. And as a result, when you look at the levy rate, you see last year we had 745. This is showing 730, so a decrease of 15 cents. But again, you cannot rely on that. That's not what's going to happen in the fall. But this is helpful for understanding the mechanics of how this works. And so this same presentation you'll see in October, and then we'll go through the same thing. So if we could see the next slide, please. This is the budget. The numbers are very small. You have copies in your file as well. But it's showing about $89.8 million in the 10 fund and $95.3 million in expenditures in the 10 fund. So this is showing a deficit of about $5.5 million. Whether that actually is going to be the number, I doubt it. It'll probably be something different than that. Hopefully not as much. And then you go down through the various funds that comprise this all in all. So these numbers all support that first slide that I showed you. The first slide is a lot easier to follow than looking at all these detail lines. But that's how that moves through.
Tom, does that $5.5 million deficit assume, does that $5.5 million deficit assume no additional funds from the state for this next school year?
At this point, that includes zero additional funds from the state. That is correct.
Thank you.
And no change in the revenue limit, no change in everything flat, just what we have right now.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. The next slide is something that you'll see in the budget report. This is just a little bit more detail as you look through it. These are the preliminary budget by major source. So you go through the 200, which would be your local sources of revenue like taxes, and then you have 300, which would be payments within Wisconsin, and you'd have 500, which would be revenue sources from the states, from transitive aids. 600 would be from the state, 700 would be from the federal, et cetera, and going across from the various funds. You see the breakout. In the budget report in October, you see this in a little bit greater detail. And the next slide shows expenditures, but this does it by major function. I briefly mentioned this in the the Finance Committee meeting, but when we set up our accounting, we do it by a functional area. The 100,000 function is the instructional function area, 110 being undifferentiated, which means it's an elementary activity. It's in a classroom where a teacher will be teaching multiple core sources, so they do not stratify it by English, math, science, but rather they bundle it together, call it undifferentiated. And then we have our regular curriculum, which is 120,000, and in there, you'd find math, science, social studies, reading, that type of thing. Then the vocational, physical, I won't read the whole list, but then you get into the 200,000, which are functions that support the activity of instructions. Pupil services, instructional staff services, general administration, like the superintendent's office, for example, school building administration, like the office of principals, and then business administration, which would be the business office and transportation and buildings and grounds and food service, et cetera. Different fund, but that's the same function. So that's kind of how that goes through. And then we also break out, on the next slide, you see we break out activities of expenditures by another thing that's called objects. And as I mentioned in the meeting, if you take the pen like I'm holding in my hand right now, this pen would be a 411, would be a general supply item. So if it's in the general fund, it would carry a 10, and then there would be a location wherever it's being used at, whichever building or department, and then it would be a 411. And then you'd come up with a function number. Where am I using it? If I'm using it as an elementary teacher, it'd be 110,000, and that's where I'd budget it. If it's office of the principal, it'd be 241. You know, if it's in my office, it'd be a 251 or a 252, depending on where in my office is being applied. So that's kind of how we break that out. And the whole budget's used that way, so we get thousands of accounts, because that's repeated for all the 9 locations in the elementaries, plus the secondary schools, et cetera, plus the departments. And so we tend to get thousands of accounts that go on. But that's how that breaks out. The next slide is the first page of the revenue limit worksheet. And the upper portion of this sheet, the top third, if you will, in yellow with 1 green bar as a total below it, that's the carryover of the revenue limit from the prior year. So when we're doing next year's revenue limit, the state gives us this, DPI gives us this, and this starts out at 73.3 million. Now this excludes any types of exemptions that were granted us that are non-recurring, which means they don't occur year after year. So a decline in enrollment is an example of that. If we lose students and we're given some money for 1 year to help us deal with that, after that year is over, that money's gone and our revenue limit drops. So that's one example of how the 5 or the 3.5 million that we got in the referendum a few years ago has been significantly depleted or gone away because of a reduction in students. So that's been shaved off till we by a few million, in fact. So the middle section there, you see 2 3-bar boxes there. The one right in the middle of the page in yellow is the first 3-year rolling average, showing years 19, 20, and 21 of what students we had for summer school and who we had in the September count. Right below that, you see a similar set of boxes, but 2019 is gone, and now you have 20, 21, and coming up, 22. That's the new 3-year rolling average. Now, of course, that looks like kind of purple column there. We won't know that until the third Friday in September. Well, actually, a couple of days or a week or so after that, because it takes time to verify every kid that is there in attendance, or if they weren't there on that day, were they in the hospital, or were they ill and then they have to return to school. I won't go through all the requirements, but there's just a lot of stuff to check it. And as a result, you take those 3 years, the first 3-year rolling average, and you get that average. And that green bar in the middle of the page says 7,142. The green bar right below it, the single one, That's for the second three-year rolling average, that's 7,081. So there's a decline of 61 students in one three-year average to the next rolling three-year average. 61 students is $626,000. So we're going to have a declining enrollment exemption of that amount, $626,777. But that's only for 1 year. And then that will drop out so that in the following year, that number in the upper top will not reflect that. So on the next slide, you see page 2. This is where we actually take those calculations, plug them in this form, and come up with a revenue limit. I won't read all of the stuff, but we start at the top with the number that came from that upper section, 73.3 million. And then we divide that by our first three-year rolling average to get a revenue limit cost per pupil. We call that the base. And that number up there happens to be 10,275. Now, there is a thing called a low revenue ceiling of $10,000. Well, we're $275 above that, so we just keep moving down the form. If we were below 10,000, we would add whatever it took to get us to 10,000. But we exceed that. Then we take that amount, 10,275, which is the amount per pupil, we multiply it by the new three-year rolling average, and we get our new revenue limit amount. And then we throw in our non-recurring hold harmless. We throw in some things like transfer service, and I won't go through all the detail of this, but we come up with an adjusted revenue limit. There are some other things that we go through on this form, energy efficiencies, adjustments for rescinded taxes, just a whole number of things, the most important of which we wind up down around line 11 with the revenue limit with all exemptions. Then we start throwing in our general aid. Now you see, here's your general aid. Now you notice you subtract that 78 million, you subtract 45 million, which is the aid, estimated aid, from that 78. And the difference is what we're allowed to levy. So when we say that the revenue limit really is made up of principally two things for simplicity's sake, it's really made up of state aid and the taxes, the tax levy, because the tax levy is a forced number. You subtract from our revenue limit the amount of state general aid we get, and that amount that we levy is a forced number. That's the maximum that can be levied. In terms of the revenue limit, that's how we go through it. We add in, of course, the things that the taxpayers have voted for in the levy for recurring purposes like retirement of our debt, a little bit from the community ed, and that's how we get our total levy of 38.2 million, which you saw on that very first page. Okay, so that's kind of a quick way we went through that. If you go to the next slide, then we're right back where we started, and that levy that you see on there, the 38.2 million that's how we got that levy. We took what our revenue limit was, we subtracted out our general aid, and bingo. That's what we got. And there are a lot of forces that come to play on that and work on it. Revenue limits are affected by, enrollments and a number of other things that I've pointed out. So that's how we came to this preliminary budget. This is the same process that we'll use when we get the actual numbers to plug in the data. And subject to your questions, I'll stop talking.
Are there any questions for Tom?
Thank you, Carlin.
I will move to adopt the preliminary 2022-23 budget as presented.
Second.
Go ahead. Motion by Mike, second by Jen. Any discussion or questions on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor with aye? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed with nay? Motion carries. Moving to item, sorry.
No, that's fine. The last item under business services is item E, removal of a house at 333 North 2nd Street. I think we talked about this at the last board meeting, and the board gave administration approval to remove the house that is owned at 333 North 2nd Street by allowing the fire department to do a training burn at the location. But the idea came up, maybe the house could be moved and we could sell the house that way, and that might add some benefit to, so any result of the bid?
We put it out in four different, multiple publications 3 times. We had it on our website the entire time, and we did not receive a single bid. No one was interested in that, so no action needs to be taken tonight. We'll just continue on with what you've already approved, and we'll move forward with the fire department.
Anything else on that, or?
Nope.
Okay. And then the last item under Business Services, Human Resources is item 8A, preliminary 2021-2022 turnover and exit information. Beth provided us some good information in our committee meeting, and Beth, you want to expand on it?
Sure. Thanks, Tom. Well, as we reported at the HR committee meeting, we did a preliminary turnover analysis because we know that we'll continue to have resignations over the summer months. This analysis is really focused on teachers because those are the individuals who are resigning right now. Usually support staff give us their notice later on in the summer. So after the first of the year, we'll do a final report, which will cover district-wide exit interview information, similar to what's included in here for teachers. So as you can see in the report, our district turnover rate is running 11.3%. Our teacher turnover rate is at 8.5%. That's running about average compared to our last 3 years of data. However, these numbers will probably increase over the next couple of months. We are well below the national average of 20.2 from an educational standpoint, and then 16% for teachers. So that's some good news. We also looked at what our neighboring districts were at in terms of turnover the last school year. We don't have complete information from them right now, but we were under all of our comparable neighboring districts in terms of turnover. We did have good success with getting individuals to return our exit interviews this year. We had a 74% return rate on those, so that was good. And as you can see in the report, the top 2 reasons for teachers leaving are retirement and family. Many of those individuals are returning back home, and some are just staying home to take care of their families. The next category there you can see is new careers and personal reasons. So of the 18 teachers who completed the exit interview information, they indicated burnout and stress, which is not surprising, and some also indicated an overwhelming workload. Others talked about student behaviors as well, so I would also like to note on the report, it's not unusual for our newer teachers to be leaving at a higher rate than the teachers that have been around for a while. As you know, we do, and you probably could tell by our personnel recommendations, we do hire a lot of teachers from UWSP. They'll come here and get a year or 2 under their belt and then return to their hometowns. So that's pretty much what we know right now. Again, we'll do a final report after the school year starts, and it'll be a little bit more comprehensive with total district numbers.
Go ahead, Beth.
I know that they have to sign their contracts
By Wednesday.
By Wednesday. How many haven't signed?
We are waiting on approximately 40 teachers at this point.
Thank you.
A lot of, we'll get a lot in the next 2 days.
Go ahead.
So when you update the report, you have like many teachers indicate, some teachers indicate. Can you, after the comment, can you just put how many that is, so we have some way of acknowledging how many is and how many some is? And I'm thinking of the statement that says, many teachers indicate a good working relationship with their supervisor, blah, blah, blah. Several express concerns with workload and mental health. Some teachers express dissatisfaction with lack of retiree health-related benefits. Can you just indicate how many in each of those areas?
I can tell you that there were 4 that expressed concerns over the lack of retiree-related health benefits. Off of the top of my head,
I don't need it, just when you update the report.
Oh,
just-
sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you, I appreciate that.
we can include that.
And thanks for doing this. As I mentioned in the committee meeting, I think in years to come, this information will become much more valuable as we have a history of this information, so we appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, and that was information only. So are there any other questions of Beth before we move on? Hearing none, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Scott, who was the acting chair for our Educational Services Committee report.
Thank you. So Educational Services meeting met on the 6th with quite a hefty agenda. So there's a lot of information. The first item on our agenda was the Wisconsin National Guard Challenge Academy. We have quite a number of students, and some of the students are in alternative learning programs. Charles Fernandez, the Pod School. Another one is I think it's the National Guard Challenge Academy. So one of the things that the administration is looking for is an approval. When these students complete the requirements, that's 5.5 months at the academy, and then come back for about 1.5 years with a mentor back to their original high school. These are students who I believe are 16 to 18-year-olds. And so we're looking for approval of having a diploma for these students, which will help them move forward to additional education. And I don't know if, Connie, did you want to mention anything about that? There are a lot of details, so.
Jerry Gerlach and John Vollendorf submitted this request, and they couldn't be here tonight, so I'm sitting in for them. As you are aware, the district is really proud that we have several pathways for students to earn a diploma. The traditional SPASH, 23.5 credit. We also have the Rural Virtual Academy, and those are diplomas that are given by the board with a designation. So it's a SPASH, and then it's designated Rural Virtual Academy. CFC has a designation for their diploma, and as this coming year, Point of Discovery School will too. So Jerry and John came forward with this proposal because our students have attended and do complete the requirements for the high school state equivalency diploma, that they be granted a diploma by the Stevens Point Area Public School District with the designation of the Wisconsin National Guard Challenge Academy. It would be yet one other pathway for a student to earn a diploma from the Stevens Point Area Public School Board. Go ahead, Donna.
Currently, they're given a diploma, but it's not a SPASH diploma. Is that the difference?
Students can come back to SPASH, and one of the reasons that Jerry and John, and I completely agree, is that this is a great, when kids go through the Challenge Academy is a very different kind of environment, and then some of them have to come back to SPASH to complete those requirements. Very different environment. It's kind of really turning, and it doesn't always work for those kids. But because the state says that the school board can issue a diploma for an alternative learning environment, which this is, and many school districts do have this designation, so that students can earn that from the academy. They're there for 5.5 months. As Chris mentioned, it's another year that they're with their mentor and doing community service and those kinds of things, and that they wouldn't have to come back to SPASH to earn all the different SPASH requirements.
They could if they chose to, though,
They
correct?
can.
Even after getting this diploma, they could still come back in and-
Absolutely, they can. It's the student's choice, but it's also a student's choice that if they want to say, I would rather get a diploma that says Wisconsin Badger Academy, great.
Okay, thank you.
So the one question that I had is, when we toured Challenge Academy this year, they talked about really, depending on the age of that, student going in, I mean, they may be almost done with SPASH. But some of them may actually have about a year left. And, but they also talked with us about, those students, oftentimes, they may choose, it may not be in the best interest, depending on what their work plan and their mentor recommendations and their parents and the student together, them returning to SPASH. So I guess my question is, are we looking then at a diploma regardless of how much more time technically that they would be in high school?
Well, the Badger Academy has that requirement of the residential and then another full year. So if they meet the requirements of what the Wisconsin Challenge Academy is, then we would say, yes, they earn that diploma with that designation.
Okay.
And then they would be a student that other students have, they may graduate before they're 18.
But Connie, they would have their HSED.
They would.
Right, which is recognized as a high school diploma wherever
Absolutely.
they go.
Absolutely.
It's just they don't have a SPASH diploma, but they can still go on to college, they can go into the military. It's just, they'd like to have that.
In short, the kids that graduate from the Challenge Academy come out with the HSED, but now they're going to have a diploma that designates their participation in the Challenge Academy, given by the Stevens Point School Board.
Good idea. Thank you.
So I'm looking for a motion to move the addition of a diploma designation for students who successfully complete the Wisconsin National Guard Challenge Academy and all necessary graduation requirements to the school board for approval.
So now you're looking for a motion to
Yeah,
approve?
I'm looking for a motion.
To approve
To
the
approve.
addition of a diploma designation.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Dennis?
Second.
And a second, okay.
Motion by Dennis, second by Jen.
Right.
Any discussion or questions on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor with aye. Aye. Any opposed with nay? Motion carries.
Thank you.
So the other three items on the agenda for educational services, we're not looking for an approval, but providing information. The first one, 4B, was mental health update. These are items that let us know how our staff and our district is supporting students that have some needs for special education, mental health supports in our schools, and with a grant from the Department of Health Services, and also, I believe, let's see, there are Portage County Health and Human Services, and a doctor from the Portage County, from Aspirus. They also help in aiding our staff and families, students in the area of mental health and social and emotional areas. So these students have enrolled in, the mental health provided to the students and families. They try to make sure that all of these students with special needs are covered, and it's a collaborative, it's collaborative in looking at all of the individual education plans, the IEPs, so that they are able to make sure that the students are covered. So it's just information of what our staff and district are doing to support the students that have those needs. The next item, 4C, was early childhood special education. So we have the early childhood special education students, 3 to 5 years old. So when they're identified with educational disabilities, this is supported by our district in a number of ways and in locations serving students with special needs. They receive some of the support that they're receiving is at home.
some is at a neutral site, and also some of the facilities. The Giselle Institute of Early Childhood at UWSP, the Excel Preschool next to Aero Academy, and we also have some of the services at 4K. Next year, we're looking at some of those services to be provided at Jefferson and McDill. All right, next, we also have 4D, how the district is supporting our students who are from refugee and immigrant family and the support services that we provide for them. Currently, I believe we have 2 families who are resettled here at Madison and Jefferson Elementary. We also have 2 more families coming from the Democratic Republic of Congo and Syria who will be arriving. They may already be here in June. And we're involved in the refugee support group. So it is a combination not only of the students, but the families and the support that they need in our community. And it's something that's been resettling for the whole family unit, and our community has really come forward to support these students. I believe there may be 30 new families coming in within this next year. But in the state of Wisconsin, there are 850 individuals who are likely to resettle in different areas in the state. So I would encourage anyone who didn't get to be, I'm not the greatest speaker on some of these. It was such a wonderful meeting. I would encourage people to take a look at the agenda for educational services. If you go to the district website under meetings, January 6th, educational services, there's a complete information on all of these different services that we're providing for the students in educational services. And that's it.
Do any board members have any questions of Chris or comments? Hearing none, we will move on to item 12A, which is non-discrimination and anti-harassment policies update. We, just a little bit of background, we contract with Neola, which is a service that basically its expertise is in keeping track of what the legislature's requiring, what's happening with statutory changes, same with respect to federal government, reviewing existing school district policies, and helping us update them so they stay, on track and up to date. Also, in the event the state at times will require us to adopt a new policy, and Neola, again, using their expertise and background, then works with each of the districts they contract with to bring forward a policy that's in the best interest of that particular district. Neola works with, it's the largest provider of these services in our state. We've been working with them for about 3.5 years. We spent over 2 years fully updating all of our policies. That we completed that, and so now we are in a cycle where we are contracted annually with Neola for them to provide us with this update services. The board, when we approved that full update, provided the authority for our superintendent in working with Carlin, or their secretary, if the changes were non-substantial, if it was a change in a statutory citation, or an update of like a typo, or a few words, or like somebody's title had changed, maybe in the state, like who we would be porting to, but items that were insubstantial, that they could go ahead and make those, and just make those on a regular basis. And then also, if we had policies that had substance to them, that the board needed to take a look at, all right, do we want to go in this direction? Do we want to go in this direction? Do we want to make the change? that those would come to us. And they've come sporadically. We as a board agreed that any of those would, if they were educational services related, they would go to Ed Services Committee first. If they were HR related, finance, they'd go to that committee. If they weren't related to any of that, they'd come directly to the board. And again, we haven't had a lot of updates. We're bringing this one forward, and this is kind of a hybrid. The recommendations on it are legal recommendations. I mean, in many ways, it's a lot of boilerplate changes that we are required to make based on federal and state changes with respect to these areas of law. But there's substance, I mean, there was just a lot there. And so we wanted to make sure that that all board members were aware, again, of what is being proposed. These have been vetted through Neola, they've been vetted through our attorneys, and our superintendent and Corey and Carlin have worked together to bring these forward to us based on those recommendations. And so administration is recommending, well, I mean, we have to change the policies this way. This is what state and federal laws requires us to do. So we did send these out to board members ahead of time just because it was a lot to read. But the reality is the change that we're being asked to make is technical and in nature and legally required. So with that, I guess I'd ask if we could get a motion on the floor to approve the motion to adopt the non-discrimination and anti-harassment related policies as presented.
So moved.
That's a motion by Scott. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mike Wade. Any discussion on the changes proposed?
Just clarification, some of the updates, and most of the updates will be related to new law policies by, state guidelines, but not all of them will. Some will be recommendations based upon current trends in education, et cetera, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep, correct. Exactly.
Thank you.
Yep. Any further questions?
And I assume we don't have to reach out to Neola for them to review these things. They are contacting
They're providing,
us automatically.
they're sending you regular.
They send us this information, and Carlin and I, and Corey would sit down with Steve for hours in this office right here, going through this stuff. And then we send it to the appropriate cabinet members, and then if need be, we contact legal counsel, and then we bring it forward. And Meg, I think it's been longer than 3.5 years since we.
I know.
I think shortly after I got here.
Okay.
And the
Could-
vast
yep.
majority of the schools in the state of Wisconsin use Neola. And Steve LaValle is a retired superintendent from Adams Friendship. I've known him for 30-some years. He actually likes the stuff.
Which puts them in question.
All right, hearing no further questions, all those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? Motion carries. We will now move into our general section. A is the appointment of citizen members for standing board committees. Again, just as background, new board members are onboarded at the end of April. We as a board determined that with committee members, we would onboard them, we would take action in June, onboarding them in July for the next full school year, or reappointing for the next full school year. When we started this, it was just prior to COVID. And we as a board had made the determination that, that we would allow citizen members to sit for 2 years on a committee, because 1 year, by the time they're done with the first year, they're finally getting the hang of what's happening. So the board members on here, three of the four currently on here, have technically been on the committee since like 2018, 2019, but they've been to fewer meetings than would be a school year. So we are asking for the board to reappoint these committee members for this next year, and then that would, then we would take a look at then going out for seeking additional members of the community for appointment to this. So that is what the substance of the request is this evening.
And Meg, when, like, what part of the cycle? So when we go to seek next year, does that happen in the first quarter? Is there a cadence?
So we usually send out, we post it, because we're gonna do the appointment in June.
Okay.
So, and we post it in usually May.
Okay.
So we give committee, citizen members about 3 weeks, I think it is, or a month. We then, those recommendations are provided to the chair of the committee.
Okay.
For the chair of the committee to review, to determine kind of where they believe what would best help that committee. And of course, that's based on who's been appointed as chair just that April, so that month before. And then the chair brings forward recommendation to the board for their respective committee. That's been the process that we have used up to now.
And I haven't seen the board reject any recommendation from any chair.
So I would look for a motion due to COVID-19 and the suspension of committee meetings. I would look for the board to consider approve the continuation of the previous citizen member committee appointments for a full year term, starting this July. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Dennis. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Scott. Chris, any discussion or questions on the motion?
Good idea.
Hearing none, all in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed with nay? Motion carries. Item B, our school perception survey results summary. And Sarah will be presenting.
I think Carlynn's gonna help me too. She's a rock star. So we began doing school perception surveys in 2014. In 2016, we adopted kind of that standard set of questions at the time for, which allows us the opportunity to compare ourselves not only to ourselves, but to other school districts. During COVID, as I shared with the board, school perceptions, the company had an opportunity to go back and take a look at, was the survey that they had effective? They hadn't really taken a look at it for a while. They developed a new question set that was shorter, had some slightly different indexes that they felt were important, and we're getting some feedback from school districts, including ours, and what we kind of wanted to see in that survey. So they developed a new survey set. So we decided this year to go ahead and move to that survey set. So while we will see indexes and benchmarks this year, we won't be able to look longitudinally back anymore. So we're kind of resetting ourselves, but I do think that's important. One, I think a shorter survey is easier on staff and parents. It gives us the same information and takes less of their time. They're more likely to complete it. And two, it gives us, again, I want that ability for us to be able to benchmark ourselves against other districts, right? To be able to see how we're comparing to ourselves is certainly important, but really being able to see how we're doing compared to our neighbors, I think will give us some different and important insights tonight. So some things I want to remember as we go through the survey, we'll look at two. So we do one as a staff survey, one is the parent survey. They're sent via email. I can't see anything. Nobody here can see anything. They are completely anonymous unless somebody puts in there like, hi, my name is Sarah O'Donnell. I need you to call me about my, one of my children. Which we do see some of that happen, and we do obviously follow up on those. So other than that, those emails go out from school perceptions. If a person does not respond to that email, they get 2 follow-ups, so they track that so they know, which ID has responded and not responded, so folks do have a reminder. We provide paper copies at schools as well for those who either prefer to take a paper copy or do not have access to the internet, and then for those who need translation services, we connect them to our parent partners. So we really do our very best to have as many folks as possible taking the survey. Carlin, if you want to go to the next slide, when we look at our staff survey respondents, we had 606 individuals complete the survey this year. It's a little bit down from previous years and puts us right at like a 44% participation rate. When we ask school perceptions, is that common? Is that, what do we see from other school districts? We see that that is a little bit low. It's a 6% drop for us, and they typically see over 50%. So we did see a little bit of a drop here. One of the things I'm always looking at is, do we have kind of an even split from where folks are represented from? I feel like that's pretty representative. And then time with the district, just especially looking at, the information that Beth is sharing previously as well, kind of who is answering that and what are we looking at overall for kind of longevity with the district. So moving into what is the survey actually measuring this year, I put all of the questions in there for you in that packet that you have, and happy to provide you a digital copy as well. I don't think it's a good exercise to go through those question by question. What I want to do tonight is give you kind of an overview of what those index scores are telling us, what I see as some key insights, and then I think it's probably good information to digest as you head into the school board retreat on the 29th. Thank you. As you start to think about what goals might be for the board, what goals might be for administration, there are certainly some opportunities to look at in here. So when we look at indexing, the three pieces that Carlin showed you before, that workday, environment, and support, build into these district-wide index breakdowns. So what we're looking at right now is from those question sets, based on where staff are feeling for academics, engagement, do they feel supported? Do they feel we have student equity? Do they feel we have staff equity? What do we see kind of for everybody? They're based on that 5-point scale, and then underneath where we see those 30th percentile, 24th, 40th, 39th, and 20th, I've highlighted for you in red anything that's below a 25%. We will see a couple questions where we're above in that 75%, so those are in green. So just visually to try to give you a really quick, here's what's working, here's some areas we might be wanting to pay some more attention to. What I found interesting when I dug a little bit deeper into the data was when we looked at engagement, no group on its own fell below that 25th percentile, but when we combine them all together, they fall right below it. So that was super interesting to me. I think that's probably worth digging into a little bit more to see kind of why that's happening, why that's occurring there. And then staff equity is really being pulled down by classroom teachers and support staff. So specifically those two groups need some attention in that staff equity. And the survey doesn't have the answer why that's happening. The survey is telling us we need to do some digging and ask some different questions and figure out kind of what we need to do next to address that, assuming the board would like to, potentially have that be one of the scores they look at.
Sarah, is there qualitative data that could inform why potentially we are seeing those numbers?
Qualitative, maybe. Yeah, I think if there's certainly information, there's a lot of comments, right?
Okay,
so
right.
I did it's tough to go through without, there's a lot of comments, right? So,
Right, which is good news too, right?
Yes, it's always good news. I think feedback is always good. I think when people stop giving you feedback is when we really have a problem. So I think that feedback is really important. I think there's definitely information in there. All administrators have access to that, and so at a district level, everyone has access to that, and then individual school administrators would have access. So John Bollendorf has access to SPASH results, Mrs. Champion has access to her results, so they're able to see on a school-by-school basis, and certainly do go through that with their staff and take a look. So you may have instances too where maybe a particular school is doing really well and another school might be struggling, there's a lot of opportunity. It's just really spending some time and looking to see kind of why that might be happening. Honestly, usually it's just asking and listening. Key insights that I saw when I looked through this, we see gaps for improvement across each of those areas. So in opportunities for workday, opportunities for environment, most heavily in support, which you'll see in that packet when you look at those questions. There's a lot of red there, a lot of below that 25th percentile. Staff equity must be explored and addressed for classroom teachers and support staff. I just really feel that that has to be looked at. And then there are 2 questions that show up both in the staff survey and the parent survey about specifically the board and administration doing what it takes to make our district successful. We scored very low on that. So I think there are definitely some strategies and tactics we can employ to do a better job of communicating, a better job of listening, a better job of that trust building piece over the course of the next year, again, should the board be interested in moving in that direction.
Sir, I have a question, and I know I don't know if you can answer it or not, but how much did the last 2 years of COVID, especially last year, affect these numbers, do you think?
I would say last year we did like a specific COVID index. So we asked folks, like, how is COVID affecting you? And I didn't see specifically that people were linking necessarily COVID to poor numbers. I think it would be very easy to blame COVID and say, you know, this is all, we're getting bad scores because of COVID. I don't think that's fair to just kind of dismiss it. I think, decisions were made, things, the way things are done, certain group, I think all of those things may have happened because of COVID, but I don't think it's fair to say.
No, and I wasn't trying to say that COVID, I've heard from a number of people that last year was worse for them than the year before.
I would agree with that, from personal experience and from what I've heard from staff.
I didn't know how much of an effect that would have on these lower numbers.
And these numbers are this year's numbers.
Right.
So this was conducted
That's what I'm saying, though, this year.
April.
That's
Yep.
what I'm talking about,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Sarah, maybe you mentioned this, but to give some meaning to the percentiles, how many schools are involved in this? In their,
Oh, that's a very good question that I don't know off the top of my head. I'd be happy.
It's 1,000.
So they are a nationally based company. They compare us to schools only located in the upper Midwest, and they select schools that are similar size, similar demographics, similar makeup. So they are really picking schools. How many schools they're picking, I don't know. I can certainly ask that question.
Yeah, would you ask that? Because
Yep.
I think it just defines that the percentiles without that information.
Absolutely.
Is a little fuzzy. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And Sarah, do we have a breakdown of the parent survey respondents, like how many parents responded, et cetera? Is it in here? Okay,
Yep,
sorry,
we'll
I
get
missed
there.
it.
No, you're okay. You're okay. So then when we get to this part, this is the part I think, we can go really fast. We could go really slow. Shout out to Brian for the green and his team. Our staff feel they have access to technology support that they need, and they have the technology that they need to do their job well. So those are certainly some positives. Carlin, I think we can go quick unless somebody wants to slow down here. This is where we'll start to see these, some of these reds. Most days I look forward to going to work. We see 80% of our people say that they agree and strongly agree, but we see that being a very low comparison when we look at those other school districts. We're only in the 6th percentile. So I would encourage, again, the board to go a little bit more slowly through that packet. There's a lot of opportunity there to try to identify, what do you see for themes and how can we work on that. Environment questions, again, these are here for your reference. We do not have to go through these line by line. That one's relative to feedback. Support is where we really start to struggle. Yeah. And in previous surveys, we would have seen this referred to as process, and we have seen some similar numbers here. The first and second is where it's really that district administration is doing what it takes to make our district successful, and the school board is doing what it takes to make our district successful. Obviously, I feel there's some room for improvement there. I did pull just all of the comments. I dumped them all into like a word cloud generator just to try to give you some super easy analysis of, just what's showing up repetitively. So this is not, scientific by any means, but it's just a repetitive. So some of these, when we see what are the district's strengths, it's what we would expect to see. Some of these are things that you're just going to see repeat, or words that will show up when we're talking about schools. Like when we go to the next slide, the question is, what are some areas in which the district could improve? And here, I think it's, a lot of these words are also just words that show up because when you're talking about schools, right, we're going to say students, we're going to say teachers. I don't think that's an indication that those are necessarily pieces that need to be improved. So, but there are some pieces in there that I think are important to take a look at. The index scores, excuse me. Again, this is the slide we saw before. This is the district-wide index breakdown. And then we went ahead and broke it down a little bit further over the next set of slides by group. So you can kind of see that same thing I was seeing here. We see that staff equity reflected at 3.31 for classroom teachers. Same questions for educational specialists, assistants, and support staff. How likely are staff to recommend the district to a friend or family? We only are at the 16th percentile for that, which does not super surprise me given the rest of the survey results that we saw. Again, I think it's just an opportunity to find out, ask those further questions about why that result is occurring, and then address it. Questions about the staff survey before we move into the family survey. I know it's a lot. And again, I want you to have time before you go into the retreat so you can look at it, ask questions. I can find answers to those other questions for you so that when you're thinking about goals for the upcoming year, you have this information to kind of reflect on and help shape and inform some of those goals. All right. Family survey. Get to my notes and make sure I'm not missing anything. This year we had exact same process we have for staff, so they all go out at the same time via email. We had just over 1,000 individuals respond. That is a 17% participation rate, very similar to what we had last year and very similar to what School Perceptions reports is an average or typical results from families and parents. We do not see any significant changes in the ethnicity of respondents. 87% were white, 7% did not respond, 3% identified as Asian Island Pacific, 2% Hispanic, 1% multiracial ethnic, 1% Black, and 1% Native American. District-wide breakdown, so we'll see these indexes be a little bit different than the other ones. So what we're really looking at from parents, do they feel informed? Do they feel included? What's their reflection on education that their student or child is receiving? Atmosphere, does my child feel safe and supported at school? And then equity, does my family feel accepted, respected, and supported at school? And here we see, we're kind of hanging out right in the middle, with the lowest being that education. My child's school is effective in helping them learn, develop, and succeed, which again, I think is just reflective of some opportunities to talk more about that in a different way, probably. Insights that I saw, generally we see gaps in engagement and satisfaction from elementary to secondary. That's not new to this year, that's not new to this survey. It's just an observation that I think is worth noting. Questions falling in the 25th or below in the comparison percentile that I see when we look through the question set, I think are reflective of what's happening with staff. So I think it's reflecting how staff are feeling in their own culture and their own buildings, and I think it's just affecting, which would make sense to me, because they really are, like, everything else seems to be okay until we get to some of those like culture questions, connection questions, and then I think that's just where we're struggling a little bit. And then all schools analysis compared to individual schools analysis and identification of gaps is something we'll do internally. The information, again, that we're providing you is all schools combined. Leadership and communication, again, we see that district heading in the right direction, school board doing what it takes to make our district successful, a little bit higher, but still nowhere near where we would want to see those. So again, I think if we're going to look at, themes we're seeing from both, this is a very strong theme that I'm seeing that I would recommend is considered to be addressed. Communication ranks in the 49th percentile from schools. Schools do a really great job. They work really hard at communication. They are wearing a lot of hats and really deserve a lot of kudos for that. School information is just, that's information. We can skip that. It's not really a big deal. And then, again, this is all schools, so we'll go question by question. Again, this is, for your information to take a look at. Carlin, we can just kind of breeze through here. I did highlight one in orange. There it is. There's a healthy culture at our school. That one's not quite in the 25th percentile, but came through in the comments as well. So I wanted to make sure that was brought to your attention. Parents do feel like they know how to support their child's learning. I think that is probably a reflection from COVID. So many, right, had to, I think, really learn how to do that. So I that's my gut on that one. And then the does your child participate or plan 7th percentile, that seems low to me with that 82%. And I did not have a chance to break this apart. I think it's reflective of elementary and secondary being together. Elementaries just don't have as many extracurricular opportunities for students as our secondary schools would. So I believe that's pulling that down a little bit there. Again, same idea here. What are some of our school strengths? So this is information coming from parents. And then the next slide, what are some areas in which our schools could improve? And again, these are just repetitive, kind of what folks are mentioning the most in there. And here, same question, how likely are you to recommend district to friend or family member? We see that jump a little bit up to the 66th percentile. Those are just our pillars. I think that's it. Questions on the family survey? No? Yeah, Mike.
Of course, we're all seeing this for
the first time. Yep.
It's kind of hard to wrap your head a little bit around a pretty, I'd say a reasonably high score for agree, strongly agree, but a low percentile number. I guess that just means that of the sample size that we're in, there's just a lot of districts that have even higher scores, so they have a higher percentile, but that's kind of a tough one to figure out, is it something you need to fix or not fix?
And I think that's where taking a look at them from the lens of being curious about those answers, right? So not so much passing judgment it's information gathering. So how do we use that to say, okay, maybe we need to dig in here a little bit more and find out why we're getting that result? Do we need to look at the comments? Do we need to hold some focus groups? Do we need, who do we need to talk to find out specifically why that result is occurring? And then are there strategies and tactics we can employ to try to improve that?
A quick request and then a question to it. First of all, I think this is really good data. I think it's a good starting point to have some healthy discussions for our district relative to people's perceptions and what we might be able to do about that. When you have could you just consider in the future perhaps for the comments? First of all, I like this as a general overview, but I'd also like to have maybe descending the top 10 comments. And I know that takes a little more time, and I know you have to make some judgment calls as to what some of the comments are, but that might be more helpful as we try to discern the reasons for particular scores. And secondly, just a question: I really like this data, but what do we pay for? Just curious.
I think each of them are around 4,000
each year. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty reasonable. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, have school perceptions given you what the measures of success are? So I appreciate the color coding, that anything that was 25% or below is in red. I still think 26%, 30%
Totally.
is still low.
Yep.
Do we define that as a board, or do you have kind of standards that school perceptions say success is at this range?
They would say they are also doing that 25% and that 75%. I think from a board's perspective, I would say either attack the percent, we want to hire strongly agree, or we want to move the needle on the comparison, or we want to move the needle on the index.
Got it.
And that really is up to this board to decide. Maybe with some input from Corey.
Thank you for that, Sarah. That's really good.
Thank you.
So Sarah, you said we have the survey comes back and there's a breakdown. I'm assuming, is it broken down secondary versus elementary? I heard that it's broken down school by school. And I guess, how are we looking to use that data? And frankly, as a board member, I'm struggling with whether that would be personally helpful for me to have that understanding. And so I guess I'm just throwing that out. Clearly, we're getting kind of the tip of the iceberg information, but I know when we look at our state scores, and those just they come to us broken out, so that we can see, where is this, where do we see potential stuff is, and I know with those state scores, there's been so much work that's been done in the district for us to, where we have a school who's doing really well in some area, really be able to pull that best practices and do some PD and stuff around that. So I'm just wondering, again, I know all of this takes time to do, but I guess I'm wondering how we're looking to use that data and whether that data might be helpful to the board to be able to take a look at.
Sarah and I have had some initial conversations, but right before the meeting tonight, we had talked about sitting down and digging into this more to figure out why some of these scores are the way they are. I anticipate using just the general overview when I create my goals and present those to you, and I would hope that as a board you would do the same. Spend some time really digging into this. If you have additional questions, reach out to Sarah or I. But there's definitely some themes, and the same themes that came up in the survey that I gave the staff after Craig and I did our State of the District. So it's coming up in more than one place, so we have to address it.
And they certainly do individually, as Sarah said, in buildings. But, I'll be frank, we got preliminary information, from Sarah, and it was just like, oh, that's just not great, is it? We've typically haven't been dealing with this. Our perception surveys have been much higher than this. So, and I don't want to, throw at COVID. We got to be accountable, and at the same time, we're coming off, a couple of really difficult years, and staff are they're burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
That was very, very clear when Corey and I went around and had the State of the State. It was a lot of comments from staff that. And, they're very respectful in how they express them, but staff are just burnt out. And then we ask you to take a survey. I'm not poo-pooing this.
No.
We've got to dive into this and learn from it and see what we can do.
I also think it's very healthy when I look at it, and I know probably when every board member looks at it, the same kind of feeling, you go, oh, okay. And if we just left it there, that wouldn't be so hot. But the fact that we actually are looking at it now and saying, what does it mean and what can we do about it? That's the whole reason we do this.
Right.
We don't do it always to pat ourselves on the back and say, hey, we did the great job and look at all this. It's like, we're doing it, we're saying there's some spots there. It may not, because if there's only 4 schools involved, we know that the comparisons are really meaningless.
Right.
But if we're looking at 100 schools, 200 schools, 300, those are comparable. It's like, okay, there are some areas where other schools are finding a way that we haven't to date. What can we do about it? And that's what healthy growth is about.
Yep.
Don't ask the question unless you really want to hear the answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Will we have access to comments as board members when we are at the retreat?
Not typically provided those.
Okay, so I guess to me, I kind of struggle. So we're going to get the data. We want to create some board goals, right? Corey's going to share her goals, but we can't dig into the data ourselves as board members.
That's why that top 10 would be helpful, in terms of, especially if it's in ascending order. Like this is number 1 comment, the number 2 or 3, 4. Then that would be helpful because that would, it's not going to get the specificity perhaps that you're looking for.
Right.
There's that balance because this is an anonymous survey.
Correct.
And so often with the comments, they're very specific.
Right, and
they're specific to whether it be building or whether it be grade or whether it, and so there's that balance to ensure that anonymity that people are provided. So I guess I am in agreement with Dennis, the idea that we could be able to see, from the comments we received, here were the half a dozen to 10 that kind of, and do they dovetail with the general results? But again, I understand that's...
Maybe we can redact
that's
some.
Work.
But it would be helpful, I think, to have more data to inform versus just kind of, right, what's been presented.
The only reason we have some options. Let me think through some options. The reason I don't include a theme is because I try very hard to not let my own bias and opinion pull into what I'm presenting to you relative to the surveys, right? Because I'm like in the thick of it. And so I just want to make sure that we have a way to present those to you that are, right, as clean as possible.
You can only do your best, but
Yeah.
I think that the problem with being too specific, and I understand that, is that if, someone might say, my teacher's John Jones, and, and then it's a matter of if we have 1,000 of these to go and redact all those, it's like, okay.
Right.
But I know that it's going to be more time consuming, but I also think we trust your judgment in order to try to find those themes, because those themes are going to be very important in terms of defining what this data means.
And especially the red items. Right, especially the red items.
Yeah.
So,
Thank
and this is not by any means an excuse. I think the reality is, we have seen more division within our community over the course of the last couple of years than we have in forever. And in particular with just the tough decisions that have been made, but also just a broader, but again, that's not an excuse to say, okay, that's the reason. It's we as a board understanding that we are the representatives of our community, and it's important that we're reaching out to help provide people with assurance that we're continuing to listen to what they're saying and work towards better action.
And just a thought, when Dennis mentioned and Jen mentioned those numbers, as a board, and looking at, and I haven't read it enough, but when people usually, and this is really generalizing, but if you're going to fill out a survey, are you going to fill it out because you're the happiest person? And if people are unhappy, for whatever reason, I think they would be more willing, and with this last couple of years, I'm not blaming COVID, but the experiences that have come upon our staff and our students and our families, and you're not happy, and you're filling out a survey to have some of the reasons, or perhaps getting some of the information. I've had people say to me, why isn't the board doing this? And I'm like, we don't do that. We don't run the operations. So the not understanding that isn't a role of the board. So
I think, Chris, the larger number of schools that are participating in this survey, the more, the smaller that issue becomes, because everybody went through similar experiences.
Right.
So I think we're far too early to make any kind of definitive.
Right.
I think we want to look at it more, and that's all it is information at this point.
Absolutely. No, and we should. It would be nice to have a more.
Again, if there's so few schools involved, that 80% may be a very good number. And if we have 90% of the schools that are at 95%, it's like, okay, now it's more meaningful if it's a large number of schools. And if it's not very many, and we don't know that, then the only thing that's really important is our local data, because there isn't enough external data to make it. We don't want to be comparing to two districts,
Right. No.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Sarah? She's walking away.
She's like, bye.
All right, we'll move into item C, District Safety and Security Committee Board Briefing.
Good evening, School Board. Thank you for having us here tonight. I'm Chris Budzinski. Most of you know me. If you don't, I'm the Facilities and Safety Manager for the school district. My team, I brought 3 teammates with us tonight. We have 30-some regulars that meet about every 6 weeks. We started meeting again this past September after COVID cleaned up and went full speed ahead. We're just going to cover tonight really, Ms. Champion, forgot to introduce you. Jessica Champion. I do have Caleb Felt and Dr. Casey here with us as well tonight, just for, if you have some questions for us. They're very integral parts of our Safety and Security Committee. Slide 2, please. What I'm going to go over really is what we've done in the last 3 to 5 years and what we're doing going forward, as just physical security measures we do on the buildings, as part of the referendum, as part of just own projects that we see out there. Hardening entry points, which would be the main entrances, adding doors and windows to those areas so it slows someone down coming in. The next one, that controlled visitor access, has to do with the exact same thing. They have the ability to, they have to go through a person in order to get into the main part of the building. And then having that manned at all times. On the front door, if you arrive when the school is not open, you have to hit a little button, a little camera says, and you say hello and state your business before you're allowed in, which is, we're using on as many doors as possible that need them. We keep identifying doors here and there and say, hey, we could use this here to ensure this door stays locked. It's just tools we have to ensure we stayed locked. The digital video surveillance system was pretty much finished being installed a couple years ago, which is, if you've seen the old one compared to the new, it's unbelievable. I hit PJ's this morning at about 6:15. My phone's ringing. I'm like, who's calling me this early? And it was a maintenance supervisor saying, hey, what are you doing in by the pool? So he's sitting at his desk, and he immediately saw me walk in and said, hey, what are you doing? Which we were looking at our interesting pool, which is another story. PA and notification systems is something we've started this year. It's something that's really important. We've got PA and systems in our buildings that are 30 years old, which we're like, hey, for most of us, that's really young. But for 30 years ago, did we have cell phones yet? Probably not. So technology, that's a long ways back. So there is a lot of new stuff that will really help us in getting to the next level of being secure and getting that alarm out there should we have an emergency. The locked doors policy has been in place. We actively patrol that. I have maintenance staff going out. When they find doors, they come back and say, hey, this one's, and then we just figure out why is that open. If it's simply just, hey, lock that door, you tell someone to lock it. If not, if there's so you just kind of, but they got to be locked. We found in any of their stories you've read lately, locked doors work. So we actively pursue that and make sure they lock them. Our student resource officers are at 3 secondary schools full-time. We also have the middle schools, the junior highs, PJs and Ben, they're on call for the elementary schools. Should there be an event they need, the principal can dial up and say, hey, come over and see our school, and they'll make stop-ins over there. So those 3 officers we use really as part of our, they're the first line of defense. They're the professionals trained in any of the really, say an active shooter situation. So we rely on them. They're the experts in that, and we've got 3 outstanding ones. And then they also put us in touch with the bigger departments. Police access to fobs and keys is something that we've really this year seemed to finally nail perfectly. We've read in different scenarios. Getting into a room is a challenge. Just by a matter of talking in a meeting, we're like, wait, why don't we do this? And it just like lights came on. We're like, yay, angels were singing. It was incredible. So we really are comfortable with the police. If they have a problem, they can get in, and without any sort of blockade, it's boom, they're indoors. They're not looking for keys. They're not doing anything they need to keep them to get in. That's what we want. Lockdown drills, there'll be 2 again this year going. COVID, they were a little abbreviated as we went through just based on social distancing. This year, the state mandates 2 lockdown drills in the schools, and we will be doing those again this year. Next slide, please. Security strategy. The next slide kind of explains this a little bit more. 2019, we adopted the Standard Response Protocol, which is a national program out there by it's the I Love You Guys Foundation. If you ever get a chance and you want to look on their website, they have a ton of information. Long story short is a gentleman whose daughter was killed in an active shooting situation in Colorado, not Columbine, but another one. They started a foundation to say, how can we give back and help and prevent this from happening? It's absolutely, the story is a tearjerker, but it was easy to get on board with their message, and it's really a simple process that we use and follow, and it's easy for people to follow along. We'll be reviewing and practicing the drills and procedures as we come out of COVID twice a year as the state mandates. The other thing we've really done is coordinating more with local authorities on our standard reunification method. That's something that we hadn't done a ton of. This year we've probably put in, a lot of people hours on getting this set up and how to do it. And Jessica will talk more about that in a couple upcoming slides on what we've been doing. The Standard Response Protocol is what we adopted in 2019. If you go to the next slide, it just shows the 5 action items we do in case of emergency. These are posted around the schools. They'll be drilled in over and over till all of us understand what they mean, are able to do them just like a fire drill. The police officers keep talking to us in our committee level saying, fire drills, we take them for granted. fire is not a good thing either when you think about it, and we don't even think twice about it. So we really need to get to that next level of, it's a drill. We act on it, it becomes really a muscle memory tactic, and you just go through it. It's, our kids face it, and we have to be on top of it. Next slide, please. That being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica. She is going to talk about the standard reunification method.
Good evening, everyone. So in January, we created an SRM task force, and SRM simply stands for the Standard Reunification Method. And so those folks that are asterisked up there had committed to a 2-day training, and those folks then also committed to becoming trainers for the district. So we are fully trained to be able to be trainers for the Standard Response Protocol as well as the Standard Reunification Method. And there's a winter briefings, there's also a summer briefings, and many of us would like to just simply go out to Colorado this summer for that summer briefings, rather than doing that virtually. But we did attend virtually in February. Next slide, please. So when we talk about the Standard Reunification Method, so as we've said previously, not everything in COVID has a negative connotation. That at the building levels, each one of us had to devise a way of reunifying parents with their children without actually having them physically come into our buildings. So we already have a reunification at each of our building levels already operational and in place for the last 2 years. So what we're looking at now is if we have to have an evacuation of that building, having an evacuation point where then the transportation would come pick us up and then go to a reunification destination. Once we're there, then central office members are actually going to become our district reunification team, because it can't be any of us on the task force, because it could be at any one of our locations. It really needs to be the operations team here at central office. So when those folks arrive, they are going to be issued a binder. We already have a flow chart identifying each one of these folks with their roles. And what I did is I simply gave you just an abbreviated look at what their binder contains. They're simply going to open it up, and this is just what it says. Initial assignments. It's going to tell them exactly what they need to do. And then on the other side of it, it's going to say, in the first 10 minutes, the first 20 minutes, I simply gave you an abbreviated list. Once again, the first 45 to the first 60. It's step by step. And one of the things that we're going to be sharing out with families at the beginning of the school year is there's a presentation done by the I Love You Guys Foundation to inform parents what that's going to look like, because, you know, we're not going to be reunifying them on site if the site happens to be a crime scene. It would have to be off-site someplace else. So, next slide, please.
Kind of a recurring theme, but even in the moments of crisis, we do provide mental health supports on site. That's to help reunifying our families, our students, and worrying about our staff as well. And so we assist with reunification of students. We discuss possible follow-up, so not just on that time, but also making sure that families are supported after the fact, because it's not a one-and-done event. There's typically that ongoing support that is needed after such events. We will bring in additional support within the buildings for staff and students following that event as well, to make sure that once we're back into those buildings or into the following location, that we can continue to consider the health and safety of our students and staff. And we're also going to collaborate with outside agencies to assist families as they need it for continual support. And that's done with our ongoing community partners that we have in place right now.
So as Chris had mentioned earlier, our task force has been super busy. We met every other week, actually, and we would meet for hours at a time in order to get all of these things in place. But there are a lot of updates that we need to put into place as well. So we are going to be reviewing and updating our emergency operations plans, or they're called EOPs. Right now, per state statute, we're covered with the current plans that we have. We're just simply updating to the ones from the Office of School Safety. And so with that as well, the work that we really need to look at is after-school events, field trips, co-curricular activities, large events such as a graduation. So we need to spend a lot of time on that. Along with that, some of you, so Chris, you were talking about having been through many superintendents. So you may remember back in the day, we had a blue flip chart which had simple scenarios in there, and it gave you some language of what you should do. What we're striving to do is that larger emergency operations plan, which is actually a 76-page document currently without the rest of those reviews of protocols in there for the second bullet. It's mirroring the same exact language in those flip charts. It's going to tell you what the administration and office staff need to do, and then the staff. So it will be completely mirrored in that. It's just going to be condensed rather than 76 pages. And then on August 4th, we actually have 2 trainers coming from Colorado from the I Love You Guys Foundation, and they will be taking our entire leadership team through a full-day training. So that full day includes the standard response protocol, the Incident Command Center, which is the ICS, which is FEMA organized. That's a pretty heady one, but we're condensing it down. The I Love You Guys have it down to a science for just that, what we need for education specifically. And then the third part of it is going to be the standard reunification method. So it's going to be a condensed version of what the task force went through for training. That's the first half of the day, and then the second half of the day is actually going through reunification exercises. And those participants will be assigned different roles. So it won't be just district office staff who are going to be in charge of those binders with those different roles. Other people are going to be going through that as well. Any questions?
Something I did wanted to add too, and I don't remember, Corey, if you remember, Spectra Print, a local company, donated all the paperwork. We have what they call a rock kit assembled at our reunification site. It's binders, boxes of binders and paperwork and signs, and they did that free of charge for the school districts. We want to put a shout out to them, just unbelievable, and we're thankful for that. And then lastly, the I Love You Guys Foundation. I remember that whole day sitting through the training. Why it was such an interesting name. It was what their daughter texted the last message they got from the student. It was just, it's a tearjerker, but you're like, that's really what put the buy in dust to say we're on board and we're not quitting and not giving up till we just keep going every day. It's it's a process that'll always change as times change, as things change, but we're committed to it and proud of our work and proud of your guys' support for it. Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead.
Of course I have.
Absolutely.
You may have said this already. Are our resource officers armed?
Yes. And they also have a safe that they only have access to. Each individual officer in the building is the only one that can open that gun safe with different arsenal of weapons they have.
Okay.
Any other board members with questions? Could you just talk a little bit, clearly this is how we're moving forward and we're working with our SROs. You mentioned that clearly our SROs are working with the larger law enforcement community. But could you talk a little bit with what we're doing on an ongoing basis with our law enforcement partners? Yep. Again, part of it is educating our community, part of it is making sure that we're in tandem with them.
Correct. So on August 4th, fire department, I talked to them last week. It's kind of been fun. This house up on North 2nd Street has put me in real close contact with fire chiefs, and also all this stuff kind of, hey, you coming on this? Yep, we'll be there. So the fire department's on board. About 3 weeks ago, I made real good connections with Seth, one of the police officers down in Plover, who they already have a really good presence. I don't know if you ever get a chance to be in the Plover area. Go by an elementary school at dismissal and start times. You will always see a police car by our buildings. I compliment them all the time on their stuff with it. So they're, all of a sudden, really, they started reaching out again. I was like, we want to get more involved again. They have been, but really want to just be coming to both the Portage County Sheriff's Department and Plover are going to join back onto our committee and meet with us every 6 weeks or however often we do it next year. So it'll be an integral part of everything we do. Trying to think anyone else. I haven't had that close with the emergency management service, like the ambulance services stuff, they kind of fall under the fire department. But I'm on the Portage County Highway Traffic Safety Commission, so we meet quarterly and we talk about stuff on there. So it's just keeping really the wheels turning, and then being pushed by you guys saying, hey, what'd you do today? Keeps us going.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job. Thanks, Chris and Jess.
So our future meeting dates and times, we've got our school board retreat on June 29th, and then, again, just keep your calendar for July 11th, but again, unless there's an item that we just have to meet for, we will likely not have a meeting in July, and then we'll be meeting in August. We now are asking that we can go into closed session under 19.85 paren 1 paren C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. 1, consideration of transportation manager employment recommendation and contract. 2, consideration of student services coordinator recommendation and contract. And 3, consideration of student services coordinator recommendation and contract. So I'm looking for a motion to go into closed session.
Move to go into closed.
Motion by Jeff,
Second.
second by Jess. Any discussion or Jen, I'm sorry.
Dennis looked at me like, Jess.
I'm thinking, see, it just happened.
You changed my name again. I know you don't like Jennifer. You like Jen.
Jess and Jen, Jess and Jen.
It is a long night, right?
All right, so I'm looking for a motion, not a motion, I'm looking for a vote. Does anybody have any questions on the motion? Hearing none, I will have Carlin call the roll.
Mr. Wade,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Ebel,
Yes.
Ms. Portson,
Yes.
Ms. Bushman,
Yes.
Mr. Robbie,
Yes.
Ms. Erler,
Yes.
and motion carries.
Okay, so we are going into closed session, and give us like 10 minutes-ish to get closed session up.
You know what? It'll be worse if you don't.
I don't think you're going to have.
What? You don't want to get up that early.
G attend.
No, I don't want to.
Okay.
You have to go. You cannot not.
I can too.
No,